Cindy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for coming to Ohio.
You're welcome. It's my
Because
pleasure.
I know it was your dream to come here and just experience humidity, right?
Well, it's a little similar to home, if I'm honest.
No, you listen. You're preaching to the choir right now. I know about humidity. But thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
And thanks for working with us on A History of the Vineyard through Song. Sort of the point of this podcast is we're just imagining this as a continuing conversation that's just sort of flowing out of that night. So if you were at the conference and you experienced that session, or maybe you watched online, or maybe you're like, I don't even know what this is, well, then you should go back and watch it on one of our channels. But this is just a conversation that flows out of that. And we just want to get to know you a little bit better because you're one of the pioneers of vineyard worship. Is it okay for me to say that?
Yeah. Makes me sound really old. I'm not that old.
Well, no.
But yes, I am a pioneer. It's true.
Yes.
One of those people.
Well, okay, before maybe we go official here, like you were the first female worship leader in the vineyard, right?
Yeah.
Was there anybody who preceded you?
Patty Kennedy and I were kind of right alongside each other, but mine started back with Carl calling me up to stand beside the stage and sing the girl part. Because, you know, it was back when there were echoes.
Beside the stage?
Oh, yeah.
Not
I never
on
went
the
on the
stage.
stage. Nope. Didn't go on the stage.
Okay.
Carl's going to hear this and roll his eyes. But it's true. He's apologized to me several times. But we were in the gym, and he would say to me before church, because we all came about an hour early to get a seat. And then he would look at me and say, hey, can you come up here? And, you know, we're going to sing, I Bless You, Lord. And he said, so can you come up and sing the chorus? I mean, the girls' part. I said, okay. So then he'd set a microphone down on the stage. And back then, the stage was just risers to hide all of the wires. Because, you know, so it was just four inches off the ground, 6 inches off the ground.
Yeah, a step.
So so everything was, so he'd set down the mic. And then we'd get to a certain song and he'd look up at me and kind of do his eyebrows and his head. And I would come down the stairs or around, you know, wherever I was sitting and pick up the mic, sing the girls' part, then put the mic down and then go back to my seat. And I've had a few times where I've told that story and people say, oh, you're the voice, because they couldn't see a person. Because,
Oh, really?
you know, there were so many people.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You couldn't see who was singing and who wasn't. So that's a long time ago.
What year is
That's
that?
when it started. That would have been 79.
Well,
80?
I was 1 year old.
Well, I wasn't born yet.
See,
love
that's
that.
when all of a sudden I sound really old.
No,
Okay.
it's awesome.
No, I'm teasing. I'm happy to be the age I'm at. I'm still alive. So the gymnasium is where all the stories started, right? That's when we had things happening when you went into the back room.
That was
So-
sort of the Calvary Chapel way, right?
Yeah.
So we do
Yeah,
ministry.
it was.
You kind of do ministry
Yeah,
in the
so
other room.
John would open it up for words of knowledge. And then when something happened where the word was about you, then you would go into the back room, which was at the time a weight room. So we had to
Like
make our way.
lifting weights?
Oh, yeah. So it was beside the gymnasium, right?
You
so,
just get a little
You're-
prayer beside the squat rack.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly what it was. So people would go back there and everybody would pray for each other. And then we would continue to worship a little bit. And then, and then the night was over. And then they'd have to tear down. So you had to stack up all the chairs, push the bleachers back, because we had to leave it spotless for school the next day.
Awesome.
Right? So
Wow.
that was, it's
Wow.
just, it was a different day.
Well, that's still some church plants, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's right.
doing the tear down setup game.
That's
and
right.
It's exhausting. But let me
It
step
is.
back just briefly. I would love to hear, how did you end up in that room, standing next to the stage speaking? Let's start a little bit more at the beginning. What's the Cindy story?
Okay, so Steve, my husband, we were friends at the time, and he took me to Calvary Chapel, Yorba Linda. And the first meeting, we were at El Dorado High School. So that would have been in 1978. So he took me there, and the first time I walked in, it's the same story that everybody says. I just felt like I was home.
Well, we've heard this story before.
I know, lots
On
of
this
times,
podcast.
right?
Literally
Everybody.
on this podcast series. Yeah. Okay. Say more.
It is. It's
Keep
the
going.
same thing. So, and the only thing that I thought was they sing for a long time, but I really like this. It felt like home. And so that was when we were at El Dorado. Then we moved to Esperanza, and it was kind of an auditorium seating style. And I walked up to Carl after one of the services, and I said, I was so bold. And I said, did you know that there's a girl part to that? And he said, do you know it? And I said, I do. And he said, okay, well, you can sing it with me next week. And my eyes flew open because that was not what I was asking about.
What did you mean by girl part? Because I know a lot of the early Vineyard songs, there's like call and response.
Yes. Well,
is that what you mean? Or
yes.
did you mean harmony?
No, call and response.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
That's why then I was coming up for just the songs that had call and response. So, I bless you, Lord. I bless you, Lord.
Yeah.
I bless you, Lord. I bless you, Lord.
Yes.
Right? It was that kind of thing.
Yes.
Girl, guy, right?
I love it.
So that was the first thing. And then I was leading worship in small groups. Mm-hmm. There just weren't very many women doing anything like that.
Were you playing guitar?
Back then? Yeah.
Okay. Were you always a guitar player?
Yeah, since high school. Not a very good one, but enough. Adequate. It was enough to write 3-chord songs, which, Carl, that's all Carl did. It was 3 chords, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like a really high bar.
Yeah.
So I felt like I could do it. And if it was a small group, if it was just in somebody's living room, then it felt like, well, of course we want to worship. So if I have my guitar and we can be in that room. So it wasn't intimidating. And the other thing is that everybody was singing. So there was no feeling of I'm on stage, I'm performing, I'm anything. Nobody even noticed me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was no weirdness for me because I was just part of the room.
You didn't have to have stage presence.
No,
you didn't have to win the room in some way.
No. And when John helped us understand closing our eyes and not paying attention to the person around us, it took a lot of pressure off to be anything more than just, I'm just going to start the song and then everybody sings with me. Mm-hmm. So there was, it was very simple, and it was accommodating for everybody in the room. Nobody felt like they didn't really know, and the songs were so simple. That Father, I adore you, lay my life before you, how I love you, right? So that's where we started. That's what it was like. So it was simple. And then we went to the second England trip. And the first England trip we didn't go because we had a family issue that came up. So we didn't go on that one. And then we went on the second one. And by then I was leading worship. And John was so great. He pulled me in and let me sing. And we had really sweet, special moments in England. So that's probably my entrance kind of into Vineyard culture.
And what did it feel like, though? I'm very interested in just what it felt like when you came into the high school, maybe the gymnasium. It's not a bunch of lights. It's like no production. I mean, I've seen the pictures. I've seen a few pictures, and I've heard some very, very, very early recordings, but I don't think they were from the gymnasium. I think they were still maybe from a proper Anaheim building, No,
the very first ones you would have heard were recorded by my friend's parents when they ran sound in the gymnasium.
Okay, so maybe I have heard that.
Some of the very first ones that you would have heard.
So, but what was it? What did you feel like?
Okay, so we would pull up to the parking lot at least an hour early, and run from our cars to get a seat. And then we would mark our seat and either stay by it or, hang out with everybody. And then worship would start. And Carl would truly play 3 chords. I'm not exaggerating with that. He'd play 3-chord songs. And back then, I don't even know if he knew what the chords were. So it was very simple, but But there was also John
Yeah.
and jazz. So the combination of those two,
Mm-hmm.
and then John's drummer was Dick Hine, who was his jazz drummer. So we had this kind of mishmash
super
of
proficient
Yes.
and
Yeah.
ultra newbie.
right. But remember, we're also coming off of the 70s. And in the 70s, there were a lot of songs on the radio that were 3 chords.
No.
So it's not like it was that different from what we were hearing on the radio. Well, obviously there were big differences, but the overarching simplicity of the songs and how you could join in right away. We had no overheads. We didn't have any of that. And
If somebody wrote a new song, how did it get introduced? There's no overheads. You're in the. Were there new songs?
yes, there were
Okay.
new songs, but usually a new song started in a home group and then ended up being something that the whole church knew, and we all started singing it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so you would start the song at a home group. Be like, hey guys, I brought a
Always.
new song,
Yeah.
always.
and you're like, hey, let me just teach you this chorus.
Yeah.
People are like, great.
Exalt the Lord, we did, gosh, I bet we sang it for a year in our home group before there was life on it with anything else. And I wrote that thinking that we'd sing it in our home group. That was the point of it, was
Yeah.
this sweet, and we have some beautiful stories from that home group setting, that was really meaningful and helpful for people, and we had these really sweet times of worship together, and it was maybe 30, well, we had big home groups, but
How many people?
anywhere from 30 to 75, it just depended
The size
on what
of the
that
average
was.
Vineyard Church is 75
Well, but
now,
here's
but that
what's-
was your home group. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that because what it points to the hunger that was just sort of around at that time, right? Yeah.
And remember too that we didn't have the internet, we didn't have any of that, right? So John would write a song, or we'd even teach a song at church, and it would go to around the world. The following week, somebody would be singing it in Africa, South Africa, or England, and it was shocking because it was just because somebody had been there that week and then took it home with them, because you didn't have internet.
Yeah.
There was no way for it to travel like that.
It's amazing.
So
that
organic.
was the way. Yes.
Yeah.
And so it would go around the world before we even knew. I mean, we barely knew the song, and they were singing it in South Africa,
Yeah.
right? And then I say this in the interview on Wednesday night, but when Isn't He was written, that song rocked us. I mean, it really moved us as a people.
And where did you hear it first?
Well, I was in Europe on a trip for my graduation.
Yeah.
I was gone, and I got a letter that was sent to the American Express office, and I opened it up, and the last part was, by the way, John wrote the most beautiful song. I can't wait for you to hear it. And so then I came home.
Who wrote the letter to you?
Penny Fulton.
Oh.
And then I came home, and the first time I heard it, I was stunned. And echo.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Wonderful.
that's the type of songs that we were doing back then,
Yeah.
right? Were the echoes.
You're like, there's
But-
a part for me.
Yes, exactly. So that's just the way that the songs were introduced and then grew. And John was in a league of his own. I mean, he was an incredible songwriter. And now his songs, he wrote chords that I could never figure out how to play them on
Yeah, I
my
don't know
guitar.
what to do
I mean,
here.
I
Yeah.
don't even know where to put my fingers for that.
Yeah, I'm not adding 9.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I'm not doing any of this.
But boy, when he sang them, those are such sweet memories of that. Him singing Spirit Song and Isn't He? And yeah.
Okay, so I have another question about like high school days, because I've seen some of the photos where Carl's in the photo. He's up front. He's got looks like an ovation or something. You know.
He did have an ovation. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. No, it's just super funny. Like
yeah.
Carl's up front. I've seen this photo a bunch of times. Carl's up front. He's got his ovation. Somebody who's playing bass.
Jerry.
Jerry who?
Jerry.
It's okay. Whatever.
My mind just went blank.
It's fine. Jerry.
I'll remember by the end.
And then there's the drummer, and then John's got his Rhodes, and then there's like a Bible up there, right on top of his Rhodes.
Yep.
So just
Because he didn't even leave. He just sat there.
okay.
and
This
taught.
is my question. This is okay. Just say more about that.
Yeah, he would just finish. They would finish what they were doing, and John would just teach from his Rhodes, from his chair. He just would keep going because I'm serious about it just being a riser.
Yeah.
That was what it was. Now, he could stand up next to something, but I don't even remember how long it was before we had a podium. That felt really different to see a podium up there. So he would just stand up or sit down. Sometimes he would pace back and forth. But a lot of the time, the Sunday nights were the sweetest times. Those were really amazing. That's where so many things happened. Deliverance and healing, and people would be worshiping, and all of a sudden you'd see them start sobbing and eyes closed, and they'd finish, and the story was, I just walked through this really hard thing in my past, and now it's over, it's done. Or someone would say, I think I got healed physically, that happened all the time.
Right.
So it was pretty wonderful and meaningful that way. I think
And
there
how
was
much prep time?
expectation
Yes,
that
and
happened.
how much prep time is going into that Sunday night meeting? Are people just kind of showing up and like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we'll do this. I don't
Yeah,
know.
they
John, you're
show
going
up.
to teach something. Well,
Oh, John never talked about what he was going to do.
yeah.
No.
He just would just open his Bible and start riffing.
So he never talked about. I never knew we never knew what he was going to talk about. But Carl would get up. He probably told them the songs, but there wasn't really there wasn't a rehearsal time per se. It's nothing like because again, all it was sound check. Are the chairs all set up? Okay, let's start. Let's try and start on time. And then we would just go. And somebody had to be recording because we had all those recordings that you've heard.
Yeah.
That would be happening too. But that was my friend's parents, just in the middle of the room with their tape recorder.
Okay. Did it feel like it was cutting edge? Did this feel like you were doing something important?
No, we just thought we were a part of a church that things were happening.
Yeah.
There was life here, and
Yeah. It
that's
felt
what we wanted
vibrant,
to do.
but it didn't feel like you were changing the world.
Oh, no. If you had told me that back then, I would have kind of giggled about it. It would have been a funny thing to have heard. Now, we did know that something shifted when Lonnie came. The night that Lonnie came.
Say more about that.
Yeah.
So
And we're talking about Lonnie Frisbee here, for those of you who don't know.
I remember what I was wearing
Wow.
because it was such an impacting, night. So he said, he taught one of the weirdest sermons I've ever heard. There was no rhyme or reason to it. He wasn't really following a course. I remember him telling us to get out our pens and to write down his grandmother's address so that we could all write her a letter. And then he talked about watching cartoons, and it was very disjointed. And then he said, I want everybody 25 and under to come forward. I don't even know how he got from where he was at to there, but he called all of us up, and I'm just telling you my experience. He called all of us up, and then he put his hand up, and he started from one side. With his hand, he was far away from everybody. He started from one side just like this, and as his hand moved across, people just started falling like dominoes.
Yeah.
It was very surprising. And
Did he have this reputation before? Did people know when Lonnie shows up?
I didn't know Lonnie.
Okay.
That
you
was
didn't
my
know?
first
You're
experience.
like, what
with
is going
him.
on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about him. So he, put his hand up, and people started falling. And there weren't very many people standing by the end of it. And whoever hadn't fallen was in awe of it. But I do know that John said that at least half of the room got up and walked out.
Wow.
And he thought, oh no. And then I remember him telling me about Tommy Coombs. Do you know that name?
I don't know.
So Tommy called him the next day and said, the Lord told me to tell you that whatever happened last night is him.
And who was Tommy? Why would that be important?
Well, he had a vineyard in Colorado.
Okay.
He had been part of one of the Jesus bands.
Okay.
And so it was just meaningful for him to
And that's somebody
call and
that
say
John
that.
would have listened to
Yes.
and
Your
respected.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he didn't know anything. Again, no internet, no
Yeah, nobody knows.
no
The-
Instagram. This is what happened last night.
Yeah, look,
it
Lonnie,
wasn't like that. Yeah. So that was really, I remember being really fascinated by that. Because again, this was all new ground. It's not like we had done this before or
Right.
we had been a part of something like this before. That's not what it was. So
And so growing up, were you like a super spiritual kid? Were you like a super Christian?
no, I did grow up in a home where I was cared for. My parents went to church all the time. We were a part of something like that. But I hit a point in time where I thought there's got to be more than this. And that was where being in the vineyard, there was a more than this that happened. I will say that relationship was key in that time. So having the people that we ended up being in relationship with because of kinship groups, small groups, that was a really essential part to being in the church that way. And we weren't separated out. We were young, but we were all in kinships with somebody who was a grandparent.
Yeah.
You know, there was no age.
Yeah. The young,
We just
young
didn't know.
adults and youth
Yeah.
group or whatever.
I remember the very first women's retreat. They said, "Oh, are you girls coming?" And we looked at them and we said, "We're not women." They're all,
Well,
"What do you think you are?"
Yeah.
We're like, "We're girls." They said, "No, this is for
Yeah,
you."
okay, so this is when
So Kay
Smith shows up.
Yeah, she was the speaker. And she told us stories about how when she was a child growing up that she would set all of her dolls up and then she'd come and pray for them and push them down. I remember her talking about that. And I think it was a time when the women, when there was suddenly, it felt like for me, there was a community of women. And that was meaningful for me because we felt like kids. And so to have other women that were ahead of us in life,
Yeah.
that was helpful. So I think that the relationships meant as much as being at church together.
Yeah,
Those
it was-
relationships were precious.
Yeah, it
And
was a
some
real
of them I
community.
still have.
Yeah.
Still to this day.
Even
They're
better.
speaking into my life. They're who I will turn to if something comes up. I would call them and say, "Hey, you know." And that one of them is that's the couple that we had home groups that were 75 to 100 people
Amazing.
in the house. So
Okay, let me shift gears here.
Okay.
Talk to me about Exalt the Lord. You were leading worship a little bit. You said earlier you kind of wrote it just for your home group.
yeah, I was in my
Interesting.
bedroom
Yeah, okay. What happened?
facing the wall
Yeah.
with my guitar. And I was reading the Psalms and I came across that one. And I picked up my guitar and started playing it. And then I taught it at our home group. It was maybe a matter of a week. So I taught it at home group the next week. And there was something really special that happened with it. And
When you wrote it, did it feel special, or were you just like, "Oh, this"?
when I wrote it, I was just writing it for home group. And
Yeah.
I love singing scripture. I lived in Hawaii for a few years and then up in San Francisco. And so the Jesus movement was happening at the time. And a lot of it was straight scripture. And I just loved it because it put something in me that I really cared about. So Seek Ye First, Karen, all of those songs, those were life-giving for me. So it didn't feel funny to sing scripture.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you read a verse and it sings to you. It does to me. So sometimes I would read it and all of a sudden I'd hear a melody or I'd have a sense of the phrasing of it, which is what happened with Exalt the Lord. And then one of my friends, Daphne, was there, Daphne Rademacher, and she said, "We have to record this," which that would have been 1989 when I wrote that. And I mean, that just seemed really outside of anything. So she took it to Brian, and Brian decided to record it. And when he came down to California to do it, the producer said, "You're singing that one part over and over again. He goes, it seems like a lot. Brian said, trust me, we'll just do it. And I listened to that recording recently, and it was really special being there that night. I don't think it was really special just because I wrote it. It was special in the room.
Yeah.
So
I know it's special in the room for even like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Right? Like it just persists. It blew the room apart in Denver. One of the coolest moments of the night.
Yeah.
I think the most meaningful story that I heard about that was when John called me. He had gone to, I think it was Korea, but I'm not sure, South Korea, but somewhere, an Asian country he went, and they were doing one of those big events, in a stadium. And he called me, which he had never called me before. So
Yeah.
First
it
time.
felt pretty special
Yeah.
to get the phone call, and it was John on the line. And he said, Cindy, I wanted to tell you that I was there for the conference, and he said, and they had just had some big concert in the venue, and the pastors just wanted to clear the air, kind of. And so all the pastors as a group walked the stadium singing Exalt the Lord.
Amazing.
And that was really meaningful.
Yeah, because when you wrote the song, you weren't like, I'm going to write something for Korea. This is for
I'm
the
gonna write
Korean.
a hit. It's going to go around the world.
Yeah, I'm going to write something big. It'll be for Korea.
Yeah, and
This is stadium.
John taught us that you never write for an audience. We're writing because this is our voice, our expression, our offering, of what we want to sing, or what or what we feel like God's singing over us, or that was kind of, so it was never about where it was going to go. It was shocking when it went places like that. My friend wrote to me from Russia. She went on a trip and she said, we're singing Exalt the Lord in Russian. So those types of moments were unbelievable because
Of course.
who knew?
No,
Who knew?
No
We
one
just
can.
didn't know.
No, you can't know.
No.
And you can't plan it. You can't make it happen.
No.
Yep.
Even if you want to, you can't make it happen.
Even if
But you
want
did
to.
have some really key things when you tell this story, which you were in Scripture, you were writing from Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
You had a secret place with the Lord. You're facing the wall in your bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows what you're up to that day. You could have been doing anything. But then you introduced it in community. And every time I've been with you, you say the same thing. You say relationships were key. Relationships are key. It's so central to the way that I see your songwriting and your life. And you still have those now. I mean, we were just talking before we turned on the mics about you and Brian still write together. So how do you maintain and find the people that you can do that with for a long time? What does that look like for you?
So I think for Brian and I, we have a friendship that is between the two of us, and then our spouses, and then his wife, Joyce, and I, and then Steve and Brian. We have a relationship that's a life relationship with our kids, with our grandkids, with just we do life together. We vacation together, all of that. So there's so much history that comes into that. And then there's a mutual respect between Brian and I. And I think that really matters too, especially when you're in a writing, because if you're intimidated or you're not sure, should I say this, or maybe that's a weird note to sing, or, any of that. But when Brian and I get together, we know we kind of just move into it easily, and there's a respect that's there. Although I will say, I hope he hears this, I will say that when Brian and I write, one time recently, he comes to my house. They came for a vacation, and he said, okay, so while we're here, I really want to work on, and I think it was Beholding was the title. And I looked at him and I said, you mean the song we finished?
Oh, no.
He said, yep, that's the song. He laughed, So he really writes hard and long, and until he can really sit with it. I've learned that from him, to keep listening and keep singing it until we know that the song is done. And so that's a relational thing, So I think
doesn't happen overnight. It takes a minute.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It takes a minute. And we've had that since 1989. We started writing together. So that's a long time.
Special.
There's other people that I have written with Terry Butler. I love Terry, and Casey, and there are the people that we've written together. But Brian and I can get things going easily because it's just a natural overflow to our relationship.
Yeah.
To your point, that really is. And we've walked through a lot of things that life has brought our way, and so I think that brings deepening. There's a depth there that matters.
I want to shift gears here for a second to talk about worship leading just for a minute, especially since you're one of the pioneering worship leaders who's a woman in the Vineyard. This started young for you, but then you're married, and then I know you have kids, and now you have grandkids. Okay, what do you want to say about leading worship as a woman through the decades? Because here's one of the things I've noticed. I've noticed sometimes that some of our best worship leaders who are women are leading worship, and then they have kids, and it's hard to be a mom, man. It's just really hard. Like, you have little kids, and there's some demands. You want to be present to your children, to your family, and sometimes they lose or they let go a little bit, which I totally understand. And a lot of them come back, and some don't. Maybe family superseded, but you were able to, I know, be a very present mom, and I know for a fact now you're a very present grandmother, but you've been able to be a worship leader. So what do you want to say about that, and what would you want to say to the other women in our movement who are trying to balance ministry, worship leading, motherhood, children, husband, family, life, soccer?
I think there's seasons for everything. And so there was a season of travel, with Vineyard Music, for example, when we used to do those conferences that were, 5,000 people show up at a conference. That was a season. Yeah. And then there was a season when I knew I had to be home. And so I stayed home. And there was worship in that season.
And when you were staying home, were you saying no to the conferences?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah. Or big events?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because
and how did that feel?
You need to be home. It was weird, and it was a little off.
Did you have a little FOMO?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And, but I had relationship with older women who were saying to me, sometimes things can happen in this season of your life, high school, let's say, in this season of your life where all of a sudden it changes the course of things. And I thought, okay, well then I need to be home because my kids matter to me more than anything.
Of course they
Definitely more than ministry.
Right.
Yeah, not Jesus, ministry,
yes.
right?
Yeah, right.
So I did stop then. And then there was a season too where I had started writing songs for the kids, and there was a Bible study, and I wrote songs for that, and then they took those songs and we put them on an album, that was I Want to Be Like Jesus. And so then I was in with the kids, and I actually thought when I was in there, I thought, oh, shoot, maybe I'll never be with adults again. What if I'm never with adults again? And then Andy said, hey, can we meet? And he called me into his office and he said, I think it's time for you to come back in. And I thought, oh, okay, so God has hold of me and sees me, and I can trust him in this.
I love that.
So then I went back into the adults.
The big room.
But I still had those kids things happening, and I had been writing songs for my own kids since they were babies. Yeah. So that wasn't a foreign thing for me. And now I've written about 20-something songs for my grandkids.
Isn't that great?
And so that's because that's the season of my life. That's the season I'm in right now. So when I have a brand new grandson, he's, well, not brand new now, but he's almost a year. And when I sing his name, his whole body lights up. Everything in him. If he's crying, he immediately turns to me and smiles. That's worth everything to me.
Yeah.
So that is my season. This isn't a season where I'm constantly on a stage or doing, actually with Brian, for this that we're doing, that's the first time I've sung in a long time. So my season, there's just a different focus. There's focuses that change, and I think I had told you that before Denver, I saw that picture of open hands.
Yeah.
And I realized that it's really easy to have something given to us. So it's this gift, it's in our hands. And for me, my hands would close tightly around it. And pretty soon I've got a fist, not an open hand. And one of the things I learned through the years is that when a season comes, hopefully you have open hands, because it's way easier when your hands are open instead of having to be pried finger by finger apart. Yeah. And it became my joy to turn something over instead of my despair. And so instead of it being an awful thing, it was a beautiful thing. You know?
That's a word. And I think that's going to encourage a lot of moms.
Yes.
You know,
encourages me sitting here.
This is also true for the guys, but it's just not the same. It's not the same. I've just seen it over and over again.
I agree.
And I've even seen my own wife deal with, am I ever going to come out of the house again?
That's right.
Am I like, oh my gosh. And then you do, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
And things happen, but you're like, is it ever going to?
Because you feel like you'll be forgotten.
Yeah.
That's what it ends up. And to your point, Nicole, that thing of how do I stop enough to see what it is that's right in front of me that I need to take care of right now. And it is the thing that you look for the whole of your life as a mom. Yeah. It's your heart living outside your body, right? So you're constantly, and I think that's the key to it, is that you're constantly asking the question, looking for the cues of when it matters. So when my kids were in high school, it mattered that I was home. And so I had to not worry about what was out there that I was missing out on, because this that's right in front of me was the season that I was in. And my grandkids, it's just so meaningful to do life with them, because it's the day in, day out life that transfers to them, right? Carol Wong said to us once that was one of the reasons that she stopped going on the conferences with John, was because she would say things and it was good. It was not like she thought it was bad that she was out there, but she said, I can say something and maybe someone will hear it and keep it for a time. But my grandkids and my kids, that's who I'm doing life with. And if anyone's going to catch anything from me, it's going to be them.
And they'll keep it forever.
Yes. And I realized, again, these were those light moments where these older women were saying things that were treasures. And so when she said that, I've never forgotten that. So being in those rooms, like when my grandsons come over and spend the night, I know there's something happening. Mm-hmm. That's a God moment. That's a human moment. That's a transference that may just be about dinner, but that's it.
Yeah. Why don't we do this just to land? Because this has been so cool. Cindy, you're clearly not just a pioneer of vineyard worship, but you're one of our mothers. Is there anything else that you would want to say to our vineyard worship community, or to the vineyard in general? You know who we are, and you have a different perspective and a different seat. Is there anything you want to say to us vineyard people?
I think that I have realized that when John was talking about, I guess my view of John talking about naturally supernatural has shifted, in that I realize now that my day in, day out experience with whoever is right in front of me, whether it's at the farmer's market mm-hmm. or the bank or my grandkids in front of me, being present to the person right in front of me has all the potential of being a naturally supernatural moment. And sometimes it's me as a mother or a grandmother, and sometimes it's the exchange of woman to woman, or mom with the son, or mom, I never know what that's going to be. And I don't think that's the point, is knowing what it is in the moment, but being who I am, being settled with who I am, and bringing myself fully into every conversation that I have. Those are precious, priceless moments. And so it doesn't have to be in a ministry setting or in a church setting. It can be in a life setting.
That's right.
And I think that I missed that with John until just recently. I think I've understood that in a way that I hadn't understood it before. So the valuing of the person in front of you, I would give that as probably my one thing. Mm-hmm. because I think by loving the person in front of me, I'm loving God.
Yeah.
And that means a lot to me. And I think the mothering part, I think I'll always be a mother. It's just, I think now that's just in who I am, whether it's me sitting down with someone who's young to talk about songwriting, or if I'm sitting down with someone who's young whose child is throwing tantrums. There's something in that I'll give myself in whatever setting or environment I'm in. And I hope I can do that till the day I die.
I think you will. And the good news is you're not going to die anytime soon. You're here for a long time, and we're gonna soak it up.
Thanks.
That's good. Dude. Hey, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing these stories. It means a lot. I know it means a lot to me, but it means a lot to the Vineyard community, because we need to hear from the people who lived it, So thank you. The stories that we hear are the ones we can live in.
Yes.
So, all right, Cindy. Thanks. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media. Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.